This is CGTN, China Global Television Network. Live from London, this is The World Today.
Hello, I'm Robin Dwyer. Welcome to the programme. Our top stories. Starvation looms for millions of Palestinians in Gaza as the United Nations says a famine draws closer every day. At the UN Security Council in New York, delays and deliberations continue over the wording of a resolution aimed at getting more aid into the besieged enclave. Day of national mourning in the Czech Republic after a gunman kills 14 people in Prague, the worst mass shooting in the country's history. And bringing Christmas cheer despite an economic chill. Hungarian charities try to support struggling families amid a cost of living crisis. 93% of the population of Gaza is facing crisis levels of hunger. That's according to the World Health Organization, which also says a quarter of people in the enclave are facing starvation. More than 500,000 people have already reached what the World Food Programme describes as catastrophic levels of hunger, even as Israel further intensifies its ground offensive.
Just to put that in perspective in terms of the world, right now we have about 129,000 people who are in this type of catastrophic situations worldwide. And in Gaza alone, you have over 500,000 people, which is like 4 times more. What is really disturbing is not just the scale of this or the magnitude of this crisis, but also at the speed that it has happened.
As conditions in Gaza continue to deteriorate, the UN Security Council continues to deliberate over the wording of a resolution aimed at getting more aid into the enclave. A vote on the proposal was delayed again on Thursday. Security Council members have been locked in days-long negotiations over the text of the resolution, centred mainly on who controls the inspection of aid allowed into Gaza. The United States, who've been blocking the vote, it says new amendments address their concerns. While the Israeli Defense Forces carry out more airstrikes and Hamas continues its rocket fire, the Hezbollah militant group is firing more shells into northern Israel. The IDF says its fighter jets are attacking Hezbollah military sites in neighbouring Lebanon as skirmishes along the border intensify. Well, let's talk to our correspondent Trent Murray in Tel Aviv. So, Trent, let's start with that situation on the Israel-Lebanon border. What can you tell us about these latest skirmishes?
Yeah, good afternoon, Robin. That's right. While much of the focus is understandably on Gaza, we have to remember tensions on that border of Lebanon and Israel are continuing to simmer. We know today, according to an IDF statement, that Hezbollah fired 20 rockets into the Shamera area of northern Israel. The IDF says that in response, it shelled those launch sites, but it also dispatched the Israeli Air Force to use jets to bomb military compounds and other military infrastructure used by Hezbollah, according to the IDF. This incident coming as a spokesperson for the Israeli Defense Force, Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari, says that Hezbollah has turned southern Lebanon into a combat zone and that their actions are putting the entire country of Lebanon at risk.
And Trent, Hamas saying it won't be releasing any more hostages until the conflict's over. How's that being taken by Israeli families, with their loved ones, of course, being held in Gaza?
Yeah, day 77, Robin, of these families waiting anxiously to try and get their loved ones home from Hamas captivity. And it would appear we are no closer to a ceasefire or even a humanitarian pause to try and allow that to happen. And that is because as part of these negotiations, which are being led by Egypt and Qatar, that Hamas is saying that it won't discuss hostage release until Israel stops its assault on Gaza entirely. And we know from the Israeli government perspective that idea is a non-starter. But Benjamin Netanyahu has said that anyone that thinks that's going to happen is detached from reality. In his words, we know families here will likely gather again this weekend in protest. They are growing increasingly anxious and upset about the situation. Many of them are now coming out publicly to put pressure on the government, saying that they just don't think the military option is working here, and they are pushing for the government of Israel to take stronger action to try and negotiate with Hamas to get their loved ones home.
Trent, thank you very much. Our correspondent Trent Murray in Tel Aviv. Well, that's the view from Israel. Let's head to Gaza now and talk to our correspondent there, Noor Harazin. So, Noor, we've been hearing from the World Health Organization about the dire food situation in Gaza. What is it like now on the ground?
Well, yes, Gaza is now recording its highest levels of food insecurity in its history. There is, and we have been saying actually this for a week, there is nothing in the markets. The shelves are empty. Here is what is happening in Gaza now. Rarely aid trucks enters the Gaza Strip through the Rafah border crossing between Egypt and Gaza. Egypt allows from 50 to 100 food trucks to enter to the Gaza Strip because the UN is not operating in northern Gaza and in middle Gaza. Most of this food is being distributed on Rafah city and on the people who are taking shelter inside Rafah city. Now, this is what happens in northern Gaza because there is no aid going through. People are actually dying of hunger. There is eyewitnesses and people who are reporting that there is people still inside their homes now for 10 days, 20 days, 1 month, even more. They are locked inside their homes, no food, no water, and the Israeli snipers are surrounding the areas, so they cannot even leave their homes or go around or go buy anything. And actually, some of them did die of hunger. Here in middle Gaza, in Deir el-Balah and Nusayrat refugee camp, some people managed to sneak in some boxes from the donations that reached the Rafah city, so people in middle Gaza have to buy these donations 10th the price. So this is how hard the situation here in Gaza. If it's available, it's going to be so expensive that most of the people here on the ground will not be able even to buy a bottle of water or a bag of flour. So yes, it is serious, it is catastrophic. 1 out of 4 people here in Gaza are starving.
And Noor, the Palestinian Health Ministry says 400 people have died in airstrikes in just the past 48 hours.
Yes, I mean, the past hours we witnessed intensive Israeli bombings, strikes, and here in middle Gaza, reports from Khan Yunis city, Rafah city in northern Gaza, very, very intensive day and night of Israeli attacks and Israeli air raids. Now, when we are talking about numbers, people killed in one strike, we would go over 10. Most of the strikes that happened over the past hours, 10 to 15 people were killed in each single strike, and that's why we have a very high number of death toll in the past hours. In Jabalia refugee camp, the Israeli warplanes targeted several homes, while at the same time the Israeli tanks were firing shells towards the homes in West Jabalia. According to the Palestinian medical sources, 30 people were killed, while dozens are still locked under the rubble. In central Gaza, the Israeli warplanes destroyed a whole block close to the Palestine mosque, which is in the heart of Gaza city. Here in southern Gaza, specifically in Khan Yunis, also we're talking about dozens of people that were killed in several Israeli strikes on Al-Burj home and Al-Najjar home. So yes, it is an intensive night of Israeli bombings, and now, and according to the Palestinian Health Ministry, the number of the death toll in Gaza is over 20,100.
Noor, thank you very much. Our correspondent Noor Harazin in Gaza. The Czech Republic is in shock after 14 people were killed by a gunman at a university in Prague. It's the worst mass shooting in the country's history. Investigators are looking into the motive for the attack by a 24-year-old man who's believed to have been a student at the university. Our correspondent Johannes Pleshberger reports.
Shock and despair after the worst mass shooting in Czechia's history. Magdalena Kavkova used to study in the very halls where the attacker randomly shot at students and university staff.
I feel anxious about the future, what will happen when it once occurred here. Also, my children are afraid. They don't want to come to Prague anymore.
The gunman who killed himself after the attack is also suspected of having murdered his father, as well as another man and an infant.
It's hard to believe that people are able to do something like that. But I would really like to know what that person was thinking of when he did that. So
investigators are now trying to work out the gunman's motivation. Though the 24-year-old attacker was a high-achieving student with no criminal record, police have suggested he might have been inspired by a similar mass shooting in Russia earlier this year. The Prague tragedy isn't the only mass shooting to haunt Europe this year. Similar incidents have occurred in Germany and Serbia. The Czech government has declared a day of mourning on Sunday to remember the victims.
So, Johannes, more details now emerging about how events unfolded yesterday and about the gunman. What more can you tell us?
Yes, Robin, the police are now quite certain that the gunman killed himself on one of these balconies after being cornered by security forces. He decided to rather commit suicide than to surrender to the policeman. And apparently he was bearing a shotgun, which doesn't have a wide range, so this also played into it. The police have also released body cam footage which show how the security forces entered this Prague University building behind me, trying to hunt down the attacker. And apparently police are now sure that the gunman killed his father before coming here, before committing this terrible act. And also it now seems to be clear that a friend of the attacker tipped off the police, telling them that the man, the 24-year-old student, was planning to come here to commit suicide. So the police responded quickly. They cleared a faculty building where the gunman was supposed to have a lecture at the university, but it was the wrong building. The gunman came here instead, and unfortunately 14 people had to die.
So that's more information about what happened during the attack. But what else do we know about the victims of the attack yesterday?
Well, the authorities say that all of the 14 victims have now been identified, but until most recently, no further information was given to the media, as far as I know. But we do know now that 27 people were treated after this attack in hospitals here in Prague, and 12 of them apparently are still in serious condition, so the death toll could further rise. Among those 27 or 24 victims, there are also 3 foreign people.
Johannes, thank you very much. Our correspondent Johannes Pleshberger in Prague. You're watching CGTN, still ahead. Calling for a Christmas miracle. The charities in Hungary trying to support struggling families amid a cost of living crisis.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhinos? And unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
I think it should be more global cooperation. I would like to hear more the voice of the developing countries.
Globalization has lifted more than 1 billion people out of poverty.
The green transition has to happen. It's a necessity.
Well, China and the United States are important powers in the world.
What unites us is much more than what divides us. And I believe China is committed to this agenda.
Join me, Juliet Mann, to set the agenda at these times every weekend on CGTN.
Events have consequences. Words create impact.
One more offensive in a long line of battles that's been ongoing for more...
Just got to be careful here with some gunshots. Excuse us.
The world today matters for your world tomorrow.
The number of casualties is growing quickly.
This is one of the hardest hit towns in the region.
The world today, every day on CGTN.
Welcome back. A reminder of our headlines. Delays and deliberations continue at the UN Security Council in New York over the wording of a resolution aimed at getting more aid into Gaza. And starvation looms for millions of Palestinians in Gaza as the United Nations says a famine draws closer every day. Well, let's talk now to Juliet Toomer, who's from the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees. Good to see you again on the programme, Juliet. So, warnings that over 90% of the population in Gaza is facing crisis levels of hunger, warnings of potential famine. What's the situation like, according to the people you have on the ground?
Exactly like you said, these are unprecedented levels of hunger. Gaza has never seen those, and this is only an indicator to how bad the situation has become very quickly, but also the direct result of the siege and the lack of basic supplies, including food for 2 million people.
So is food what's most badly needed? What kind of aid does Gaza need at the moment?
Look, everything is needed, and we're talking here about the basics, and what people need most is safety and protection. They also need everything that is super basic because they have lost everything, because the vast majority of them are now displaced, including in United Nations shelters. And we are not getting the humanitarian supplies that we need to cater and respond to a humanitarian crisis this size and this scale. And so we need to get much, much more.
So as you say, lots of displaced people, estimates around 85% of the population has been displaced from their homes. What could that mean, both short-term and longer-term?
It means that the more we have bombardments and the more the war continues, there will be more people who are forced to flee their homes. The more that we have these evacuation orders that the Israeli authorities continue to issue, including this morning, we will see an exodus of people continue to search safety, search shelter. And they will come to UNRWA facilities, which are already at 4 or 5 times their capacity. And so the combination of the war and the siege and the lack of availability of basic supplies, including food, has led to the assessment that we've seen last night of unprecedented levels of hunger and starvation.
So we have this vote due from the UN Security Council on a resolution to get more aid into Gaza. How important could that be?
Very, very important and very critical. There needs to be, you see, a standard and regular flow of humanitarian supplies that should come into Gaza. There also needs to be supplies, commercial supplies that come to the markets. Not one commercial commodity has been allowed into the Gaza Strip since the war began now 11 weeks ago. And it means that 2 million people are now dependent on a humanitarian operation that does not have enough to be able to cater to the needs.
Juliet Toomer from the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees, thank you for joining us today. The death toll from Monday's earthquake in northwest China's Gansu province has now risen to 144. 9 people were also found dead on Friday in neighbouring Qinghai province. Search and rescue operations have now moved to resettling people left homeless amid freezing temperatures. Our correspondent Guo Tianqi reports from Jijiashan County, near the epicentre of the earthquake.
The relief efforts in Gansu has already shifted into ensuring the livelihood of the affected communities. While I'm still at the largest resettlement site in the Dahejia town, the epicenter is called the Dahe Village Resettlement Site, providing shelter for about 1,000 people. And this place is also a vast majority of the rescue forces are stationed. For example, there are PLA, the armed police, and the firefighters. And also we can see that today is the 4th day after the earthquake. The public services are more and more perfect. For example, the electricity and telecommunication of the affected areas are fully resumed. And also this place is covered with free Wi-Fi provided by the China Telecom. And also you can see that the temperature in this area, especially during the night, can dip into minus 15 degrees Celsius. So every tent is equipped with a heating stove, and everyone can have enough warm clothes and warm quilts and beddings. Also, hot meals are available everywhere and every time, 24 hours in this resettlement site. And especially today is China's winter solstice. It's a tradition in these areas to have dumplings and mutton soup. Also, lots of institutes and volunteers, they're providing those foods for the people here. And also behind me you can still see some water vapors. Even if it's already after the dinner time, the volunteers are still serving the people those traditional foods to ensure them that they can spend a simple winter solstice festival tonight. Well, apart from the logistics and daily necessities, the mental health of the people that living in the resettlement camp are also taken care of, especially for the children and students. Earlier this day, we came into some earthquake experts, and they are sending some books to the children using their spare time to teach them the skills to escape from the earthquake. And also the China Post is establishing some libraries and playrooms for the children. And also the authorities say later they will put up some tents for the high school and middle school students to use as temporary schools to help them to resume their study.
2 people have been injured when Russian drones hit an apartment block in Ukraine's capital in the early hours of Friday. Officials say 24 out of 28 drones were shot down over Kyiv before landing, but one hit a residential area south of the city, starting a fire in the upper floors of the building. It's the 6th attack of its kind on Kyiv this month. The night of bombardment also targeted parts of central, southern and western Ukraine. Banks that help Russia bypass international sanctions will face new penalties under legislation due to be signed by US President Biden. The measures will also block Russian goods processed in a third country from entering the American market. Meanwhile, Moscow's warned it will retaliate over plans by Washington to use confiscated Russian assets to fund Ukraine's military. Policymakers have suggested that close to $300 billion in frozen Russian cash could be used to boost Ukraine's defense spending. Senior military officials from China and the United States have held their first talks in more than a year. The head of the military body responsible for China's combat operations and planning spoke with his US counterpart via video link. China's President Xi and US President Biden agreed last month to restart military-to-military communication. It stopped in August last year after then US House Majority Leader Nancy Pelosi visited Taiwan. Former Pakistan Prime Minister Imran Khan has been granted bail by the country's Supreme Court after being charged with leaking state secrets. He's pleaded not guilty. The charges are related to classified information sent by Pakistan's ambassador in Washington last year, which Khan is accused of making public. It's not clear whether Khan will be freed from jail, as he faces multiple arrest warrants in several other cases. In Hungary, the season's festivities are being overshadowed by an economic chill. Inflation in the country remains the highest in the European Union, despite easing in the past few months. Charities say they're struggling to support those in need. Our correspondent Pablo Gutierrez reports.
Christmas time is here, and Eva Kovacs, like many other Hungarians, is seeking a glimmer of hope. This year has been challenging, with basic necessities like food and electricity becoming more expensive. Kovacs fears her paycheck won't stretch far enough to buy gifts for her 6 children.
I recently began working again after separating from my partner. I was in an abusive relationship, so the past year has been incredibly tough for all of us.
Spreading a bit of cheer this season is one of the many missions of the Tunderpak Foundation, which helps single mothers struggling financially, including those who have left abusive relationships, rebuild their lives.
This year, we are providing gifts to approximately 150 children at this event. We'll also give the mothers a $30 gift card to help with their grocery expenses.
Timea Shomolani looks forward to seeing the children's joy when they get their presents every year, but she says buying gifts was more challenging this time.
It's not just families facing hardship this season. Charities are hoping for a Christmas miracle as they themselves are struggling with fewer donations to help the needy due to the cost of living crisis.
And it's not only the smaller non-profits. Even the metropolitan branch of the Hungarian Red Cross has had to stretch its resources this year. It aims to distribute around 2,000 packages in Budapest and hopes for a last-minute surge in donations as Christmas approaches.
We're seeing more requests for assistance from unemployed parents. Many of them are very young. We've also seen an influx of families move to Budapest searching for work, and they often find themselves needing help.
Despite the challenges, this holiday season is also a time for gratitude. The founder of one of Hungary's largest children's charities says he's thankful for the abundance of goodwill that still exists.
Very simple. Everybody have to know that you have to just love the kids and to say, hello, you are nice to hear, I am very happy, I give you a small present or something. And the kids are happy.
Even as purse strings tighten and families face hardship, charities in Hungary say they will continue to give the gift of hope. Pablo Gutierrez, CGTN, Budapest.
From Canada to China, the world has marked the winter solstice, celebrating the Northern Hemisphere's shortest day and longest night of the year. Hundreds of revelers gathered at one of the United Kingdom's oldest sites at sunrise. While in Canada, performers took to the streets in the annual Solstice Parade. Giant pandas in China were treated to a hearty meal featuring bamboo shoots and carrots. The headlines again. Starvation looms for millions of Palestinians in Gaza as the United Nations says a famine draws closer every day. Delays and deliberations continue at the UN Security Council in New York over the wording of a resolution aimed at getting more aid into the besieged enclave. And a day of national mourning in the Czech Republic after a gunman kills 14 people in Prague, the worst mass shooting in the country's history. And that is The World Today. Thanks for watching. There's more news on CGTN Europe's channel on the Telegram app, or scan the QR code on the screen to get stories and updates sent direct to your phone. We're back with more news at the top of the hour. Coming up next, it's World Insight. For now, from all of the team in London, it's goodbye.